FNR, Football Nation Radio.
No call! Score!
Salamidi for Cole. Cole on the run. Shoots. 2-0.
Lazanovsky with the free kick. Launches a rocket! Trimboli. What vision! Blasts. Yes! Edge!
Vujovic.
Beautiful ball! Here's Matic. They haven't! They might have won it!
The Pioneers with George Danikian and George Kotsanis on FNR, Football Nation Radio.
George Kotsanis, welcome to the program.
Thank
it's
you,
the best
George
time of the week. We're breaking tradition today. Normally, I don't know how you manage it, but you always deliver some sort of winger. But today, we've actually cast our net as far as we could, and we've come up with a midfielder. But he wasn't just any midfielder. This guy debuted for Footscray JUST at the tender age of 18 in the old NSL. Played with Sunshine George Cross, Adelaide City. Then he moved to a club.
Can you just say George Cross again? Because during the week when I posted on social media, I forgot to mention that he played for George Cross, and at some point
Sunshine
I thought I was going to...
George Cross.
Thank you. I thought I was going to get
nailed.
crucified. Yeah, nailed to a cross.
It's not Easter yet. Adelaide City, also, he had the opportunity to immerse himself and take on board some of the wonderful coaching of Zoran Matic, who told him, and he's going to repeat it for us, I'm sure,
sure he will.
what he was told at half-time in his very first game playing for Adelaide City. He then moved to Europe to play for Stoke City in England. Never got much of a chance at Stoke. In fact, I think he played in a 2-2 draw against Crewe Alexander in a Football League Trophy game in about 1993. He then did something even more magical. He did what some Australians occasionally do. They get bold, they dare, and they challenge themselves. He went to Europe. He went to a place called Portugal.
So England wasn't in Europe?
No.
All right.
You know how this business works.
Okay.
He played for Estoril, participating in the Primera Division in 93-94, where he scored his only goal against Benfica. He doesn't score just against anybody.
Well, he's the first guest we've had on the Pioneers who scored a goal against Benfica. I can vouch for that.
And after that, he thought, you know what, I'm getting a bit homesick. So he came back to Australia. He played for Gippsland Falcons and then Perth Glory.
What about the Warriors? You left out Collingwood Warriors.
Well, I didn't want to mention the Warriors tonight. We had Jack Riley in earlier, and he was talking about Carlton, so I didn't want to mention Carlton and Collingwood in the same breath.
All right.
And then he decided, you know what, the wanderlust, he had to go to a place called Singapore. And he spent 3 years there. I'm talking about a guy who I remember him as a not only as a firebrand, but played 30 plus times for Australia. But I remember him as a young guy who spoke Hungarian when he wanted to, and occasionally would sprout something in Serbo-Croatian. Ernie Tapai, welcome to the Pioneers.
Thank you very much for having me.
How much fun did you have in your time? You came to the game late. I think, unlike George and George, we started very, very early in our lives. We just wanted to play with the round ball.
You earlier than all of us.
You didn't come into the game until you were about 13, 14 or something.
Well, my first junior club was Melbourne Hungaria, and I started at 12. So it wasn't late. It was raw talent. It was want. But there was no technique. There was nothing. There was just run and
speed.
Go. Yeah, speed. That was the only attribute that I had at that time, and I had to learn quick.
But speed kills. It's very scary.
Yeah.
You can harness it. It's great.
Yeah, it worked for me, but I was passionate and I was willing to learn, and fortunately within a very short space of time. I was 12 when I started. At 13 I made the state team, 14, 15, 16 state team. So, I got around better players and quality improved.
Made a difference, eh?
Yeah, it did. Sure.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
What we normally do on the show, or we try to do, is ask people their very first football or soccer memory. So before going and starting at Melbourne Hungaria Juniors, have you got any memories before that?
Just first game, mate?
Just school
Watching.
soccer, but I've got to tell you that my first ever game for Melbourne Hungaria under 12s was a half-time game at Olympic Park.
I
All
like
right,
it.
10 minutes each way or whatever it was against Melbourne, Croatia under 12s.
Yep.
We got thumped 4-0 in 10 minutes. All right. But it was at Olympic Park, so I was on the big stage first up before I'd even got into the local park. So I was thrilled about
Who
that.
was-
It must have
what
been
was-
huge.
what was
Did you
the
play
senior
half? Did you play half the ground, or did you play the full ground?
No, full ground.
When
Yeah.
you were exhausted, and got wiped out.
Yeah, and 4-0. I didn't think it was possible to concede 4 goals in 10 minutes, but yeah, they were a good side. They had the likes of Robbie Markovac and those guys, and they were a very good side at the time. So.
Very good, very good. So that's the first memory.
And then it's a bit of a blur after that. I mean, yeah, like I said, the state team, the first time I got picked for the state team was a shock for me because it was like, all these kids who was been playing from 7, 8 years old, and, I was invited to the trials, got into the regionals, and then I'd get picked for a state team.
So were you central? Was Melbourne Hungaria under the central in the...
Correct.
Yeah, okay,
Correct.
cool, because you were
Correct.
still playing at it. Middle Park, or the outskirts of Middle Park.
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct. So they had a good system in those days where the regional
Yeah.
come together, and then out of the regional competitions they picked a squad of state side, and Tony Dunkley for many years as a
Many guys your age and our age would have come across Tony.
yes, he had a lot to do with the game, obviously, and commissioner, and yeah.
Your parents help you or take you to those early games to inspire you, or not at all?
There was no football knowledge in our family at all.
Oh, really?
My dad was a swimmer, but
But
obviously
Hungarian, yeah,
But, yeah.
from one of the greatest nations in the 40s and 50s.
But he was passionate about watching the game,
Uh-huh.
and they were very, very supportive. They took me to all training sessions and all games, and they were very much part of it. And even in the later years, they never missed a game.
So what do you like as a swimmer?
No, not great. And he taught me that's why. And he put a rope around me, pretty much threw me in the river and said, "Learn to swim." That's not the way to learn to swim.
Apparently not.
That's scary.
Yeah.
You were born in a place other than Australia. Take us back.
Yeah, I was born in the former Yugoslavia, and I don't remember a lot of it because I came here as a 3-year-old. My parents did go back once when we were young on the holidays. When I was in Europe, because we didn't come out with any family. My parents came out with a suitcase, and I got cousins and aunties and everything there. And while I was in Portugal, I was invited to weddings and everything, but of course the war was on. And they said, "Well, you can sneak through this border and that border."
Oh,
I said,
dear.
"No, I don't think so, because my passport says where I was born, and they'll grab me and throw me straight on the front line, and I don't want that." No.
You were fast, but not that fast.
No, so I avoided going. I was fortunate enough to travel the world, and certainly Europe many, many times, but I avoided going back there.
Ernie, you played for Footscray JUST, Sunshine George Cross, Adelaide City, Stoke City, Estoril, Morwell Falcons, the Collingwood Warriors, as Georgie said, Perth Glory, Home United in Singapore, and also in Singapore, Clementi Khalsa. What was that like? Of all those clubs, have they given you all something? Did you take something from each and every experience?
Yeah, and you know what? I have been criticised over the years. There's no doubt that I've had too many clubs. And when I look at that list, I think to myself, I've probably had too many clubs. But some
You
of
need
them,
14 to play golf, mate.
but I was forced into a lot of situations. In the case of Footscray JUST, they were relegated. George Cross were on their way out. Collingwood Warriors folded. So some of them were
Totally out of your control.
out of my
Yeah,
control.
yeah.
So, yeah.
Your senior debut, you made with Melbourne Hungaria as a 15, 16-year-old.
That's fantastic.
Have you got memories of that and how it happened? Or?
My first game was I was in the reserves, and I remember the coaches coming up to me at half time and saying, "You're not playing second half." I went, "Wow,
that
did I
old
play
one."
that bad?" You know? And they said, "No, go get a tracksuit. You're sitting on the bench for the seniors." I would have been probably not even 15 and a half.
Wow.
And I went, "Wow!" I went from disappointment to
Euphoria.
I wasn't, to euphoria. And
Did you play that? Came on that?
yeah,
the bench?
they gave me a few minutes in that game.
Do you remember who that was against?
No, I couldn't tell you. No.
Was it at,
He was so excited.
Was it at Middle Park though?
George, I have trouble remembering my kids' names at home, and you want
No.
me to go back that far?
I'm not even going to ask you your kids' names, but it's our duty to ask the questions. And you're not the first guest who's looked at me and went, "I can't remember," so
No
it's not a
idea.
problem. But it was Middle Park, you reckon?
It was Middle Park, yes.
Okay, cool.
Yes.
All right.
Yep.
We'll get the stats men at home to look up that game and see if we can find out.
If you have a problem with memories, what was it like when you were coaching?
Oh, terrible. Terrible. I took me weeks to work out the guys' names.
Hey, you.
No, serious. And then, you know sometimes you get two faces that look similar.
Oh, yeah.
And then...
Like George Katsanis and George Danikian.
something
Yeah,
like
yeah.
that, And then I called them by the wrong name, and I said, well, you know what, and then I started studying them at home, and then I said, sometimes at the clubs, I said to them, give me photos so I can go home and study the names. And I know, I'm very good like that.
Fantastic.
So you played at Melbourne Hungaria. You got a sniff of it. What came about that made you move to Footscray JUST? How did that move come about?
It was funny because I was the following year I played a full season in the first team, and then they had in the off season at Knox City they had the mini World Cup.
Oh, the old World Cup, yes.
Yeah, and I played for how many countries did I play for? By that time I played for Hungary.
Don't worry, I played for Scotland in that too.
So I played for Hungary, and there was a few guys there. Simon Tarudia, who was a team manager, and Chedo Chukovic, who was the coach at Footscray. He was at the games, and by that time I was already in the Victorian under-19s, so I'm sure that people were around the
You were
place.
making noises?
Not so much me,
Yeah,
but
yeah.
generally they're looking at those guys at that age. And then I got the call saying, do you want to come and meet? Would you like to come and play in the NSL? I couldn't run fast enough to pump road to sign the contract. Yeah, so, yeah.
How fantastic.
Yeah.
What do you
And it was a
remember?
difficult one actually because the year that I left Melbourne Hungaria, Pat Bannon had just taken over as coach, and I had so much respect for Pat. And I used to go to NSL games, and I used to watch these guys, these legends, and so when he came to the club, I was overawed, like I was with a lot of these guys. So when he's saying to me, "You got to sign in here," and to say no to Pat Bannon, well, it was really, really difficult. But I had to
I understood
give it a
that because I had a sliding doors moment as well where Paddy Bannon tried to sign me at Melbourne Hungaria in about '88, and Suburbs put a huge price on my head because I was such an important reserves player. But that's another story. So we both missed out on Paddy Bannon at Melbourne Hungaria. So what was your memories of moving from, the Hungarians at Middle Park to the National League level at Schindler as it was? What are your first memories
What was the
of turning
difference?
up?
Yeah.
Oh, it's a huge difference.
Was it?
Yeah.
Coaching?
Yeah. Well, the surface was better, obviously,
Of course.
and the pre-season competition was at Olympic Park.
Yeah, the
So
old
to play at
handball
Olympic
cup.
Park, and they were double headers with big crowds, and that blew me away. And I remember, and probably in those days maybe 8,000 or 9,000, but it was like playing at the MCG, for me.
And you weren't scarred by your experience as a 12-year-old losing 4-0 to the Croatians?
Yeah, well, no. We got a few over the Croatians after that, so it was always nice because
Well, the difference from the 12-year-old Croatians, the Crows hadn't grown since then, whereas Ernie might have grown a little bit.
And you're
since-
right, because they were all freaking 6 foot at
11 years old.
11 years old, yeah.
yeah.
No, we were 3 foot nothing.
You caught up by then.
Yeah.
Most of them were born 5 foot and 11.
By that time, when you were 18, 19, you probably, into Taekwondo or something to defend yourself.
Well, it was a tough
Initiation.
into the league at the time. There was a lot of British players who the mentality was, and there wasn't a camera in every corner of the ground, so players got away with a lot. And in the end, I thought, I'm going to have to toughen up, and I'm going to have to get in the gym and do some martial arts and just look after myself a bit better because I won't last.
Shin pads?
In the early days, I didn't like him like a lot of players didn't, and when it was forced upon us, then we had to, obviously.
Years with
And it was-
89, 1990, it
Yeah.
started to be compulsory.
And it probably just as well because, I may not be here talking to you.
Yeah, so those training days, so with that step up just at training, not playing, was there a noticeable difference even with the physicality at training? Like, were you tested physically and mentally at training?
Absolutely, but I got a little bit of a taste of it because when I was in Melbourne Hungaria, I got to play against Brunswick Juventus in a Doherty Cup match, all right? And that was just before Fabian Cantalupo and all those guys were going to the World Cup, and I remember, and they were so good, and they were so big, and they were so strong. I don't think I touched the ball in that game, and everything was 100 miles an hour, and I thought, this is what the NSL's about, God almighty, I'm not going to last, and yeah, so I got a little bit of a taste of it, and when I got to Footscray, I mean, the people at Footscray and the players were fantastic. They made me feel welcome at home straight away. In fact, and I was overawed by a lot of these guys because I used to watch them play. So when you go and watch somebody and they're legend status, and you go in there and they're talking to you, I felt uncomfortable always. And then the worst thing that could have happened was Cheddar Chikovic, after 4 games, said, "You're going to be the penalty taker for the year."
How did that come about? Did someone else miss a few, or were you doing well at training?
No, I think what I was doing is Dennis Boland was in goals at the time,
Oh, yeah.
and I used to stay back after training just to do a little bit of extra training, and every now and then we'd take some penalties, and somebody must have missed, I reckon, and
Short
It's
straw.
him.
yeah, and then I don't know why he did that. I mean, that was a big call to you know.
Did you miss many?
Not the first year, no, I didn't. No, after that I did.
Then you thought about it too much.
Yeah,
huh?
yeah. After, and you know what? And because I knew that I was taking the penalties, and because I was young, and Dennis was really good, he would stay back after training all the time, so I would take hundreds of penalties. So in the first year, I think I took 4 or 5, maybe, and I didn't miss one. The second year, I missed 2 in 1 week.
Ouch.
Were you sacked at that point from taking him, or did they leave?
That was it. Yeah, midweek game, I missed one, and then Jeff Olver saved one on the weekend, and it was terrible because Sekularac was the coach at the time, and he said to me,
Drago.
before the game, he said to me, the last week we were match of the day, all right? And he said, if you take a penalty, change sides, all right?
Because they're watching.
Yeah, he goes, they're watching. And I walked up and I put it in the same spot as I normally put it, and Jeff saved it.
Yeah, because he'd watched the replay, huh?
Didn't go.
But I'm sure if you're coaching, would you tell a penalty taker to stick to their routine and go with what they know, or would you have told him what Shecky told you?
I don't think I'd change it. The only thing that, as when I coached and I got into this scenario with a player one time, a young African player who was very talented but just used to do things out of the ordinary, and when he took the penalty, I said to him, do not do anything silly. Just hit it as hard as you can, pick a spot, hit it as hard as you can. Whatever happens, happens. If you miss, if he saves it, so be it.
Yep.
And he did the opposite, just like I did. When I walked up to it, stopped and tried to chip it straight into the arms of the keeper. So, yeah.
Coaches can overdo it.
Talk to us about some of the great influences, the coaches that you've had the good fortune to play under, people who made a difference. You mentioned Drago Sekularac, Zoran Matic too.
Yeah, well, Drago was a great coach for me, as in personally, because he was so talented himself that he would actually go out in training and show us how to do it. At training at 52, he was still our best player. You know, if he could run, he could have played in the NSL at that age. Zoran Matic was tactically the best coach, and he's produced so many players there. And you knew with Adelaide City in advance, 4 moves in advance where the ball was going, and it's no surprise that he had so much success there. And really, he did it so well because if you look back at the history of and the stats of Adelaide City, because pre-season the competition, the first division is so weak, we would play pre-season games and win 10-12-0, so we wouldn't get a hit out, all right? And the first 3 or 4 games of any season, we'd be lucky to have 1 point and always make the final. Zoran always made the final and always did well and competed. So he worked with a very small squad. He never chopped and changed. Even when we lost 3-4 in a row in those early games, he would stick with the same players. He said to us, I will not drop you because you play bad. I'll kick you out if you don't do what I tell you to do. You know.
Now, on that subject, you did something that very first game playing for Adelaide.
Yeah.
He had a particular idea about how he wanted his players to play.
Well, I'll go to the first training session. Training session, as you do, players, you're training and you shoot and you miss and you swear. And he came up to me and said, this club we don't swear. And by the time I was 24,
Wow.
I was married and I was an adult, and I thought, well, the coach is going to tell me I can't swear. And he said, no. He said, we don't swear here because you know what? Today it's this, tomorrow it's that. But if you're 2 players are in a bad mood and you're swearing at each other, that's where things happen. And he was right, and he created a culture with adults. So, which has been a good learning curve for me because I thought if you can do that with adults, then I've got that rule at home with our kids. There's no swearing at home. All right, I know you swear, but just don't do it in front of me. You know. So.
Okay, so that was the first thing.
One.
Yeah, what was the second thing?
The second thing was Derby. His rule was that you could not cross inwards towards a goalkeeper because he commits players forward. The goalkeeper comes out. If he grabs it, And with one throw, he'll beat
So
half
if
the
you're
team.
flying down a left wing on your left foot, you're not to cut back in onto your right, or
And
vice versa, and whatever.
And cross it with your right
So
towards
you
the
must
keeper.
do it with the way you're running.
So
Correct.
first game, you did that.
And he said, I'd rather you kick the ball out for a goal kick, and I'm happy with that.
Of course,
right?
he was being facetious, but he was setting the standard.
Yeah.
So I go down the left-hand side in the derby against West Adelaide, 15,000 people at Hindmarsh Stadium. I'm thinking I'm doing the right thing. I cut back on the right side, I cross it to the far post. Joe Mullen comes at the back post, hits a crossbar in a big game. And all right, we won that game. I think we won that game, but we could have been ahead with that goal. I went at half-time, all happy with myself, and he walked in. The first thing he said to me, he says, if you ever do that again, you'll never play for this club again.
Wow.
So yeah, he had certain rules on certain things, the way he wanted to play, and that was not changing.
More
very much.
importantly, did you ever do it again?
No.
So, lesson learned for you, message across from the coach, and everyone's back on the same page.
Absolutely.
And I think we had Goran Lozanovsky here who mentioned the same thing, that the training, the drills, the preparation, that everyone was on the same page. You went over and over and over again. It sounded like he was methodical and as well prepared as anyone you would have
Look,
played
we
against,
could have
played
each,
under.
we could have each written a book about exactly how we want to play it, and it would have been identical. And and it was actually enjoyable because you're not making runs, silly runs, where you know you're not going to get the ball. Right? We knew that if I make a run, I am going to get the ball, and it was enjoyable to play with, and we got a lot of the ball, and we were hard to beat. And in fact, the second season I was there, we won the double.
Yeah.
League and the
Just want to
cup.
go back to JUST. You had that one outstanding season when you were top of the league, and the finals I didn't think worked out your way, but you were top of the league in the league campaign, is that right?
Yeah, we lost in the finals against Adelaide City, ironically, and then went on to play Sydney Olympic. And
Yeah, so you had a super side, you had
Yep.
a super year under Shecky.
Yep.
Tell us your memories about that season and how, because traditionally JUST in the NSL were a middle of the road team constantly,
and lower.
and lower. So this was a standout season for them.
Yep.
You had an outstanding team. Shecky's influence?
Yeah, big influence. I mean, he came in and he's just sparked the place up. You know, he was a character in himself. Very, very passionate man. In fact, we often trained twice a day. You know, he would get us in the morning to do pre-season and go to work all day and then come back in the afternoon. I wouldn't say often, but probably once or twice a week. Certainly in the pre-season.
How did the players cope with that?
There was a bit of moaning and groaning.
Resistance initially?
Yeah, because it was hard enough to have an 8-hour job and then train at
In
5
the
nights a
evening,
week,
yeah.
and then to have to come in the morning. And in my case, I was coming from Endeavour Hills to Footscray in the morning with no freeways in those days. So it was a long drive in the morning and it was a long day.
So he tested you,
Mentally.
tested your commitment, didn't he?
Yeah. And he bought 3 great players in. He bought Nikitovic, who was the goalkeeper, and Stosic, and they have another centre half as well. I can't think of his name right now. And Vukcevic.
Yeah.
So they made a difference. Aussie Latif came into the squad as well, Warren Spink. So he strengthened the squad, but he had a pattern of play. We did a lot of shadow play. So again, very similar to Zoran Matic, we knew where the ball was sort of going to go in the next direction.
Vlado Stosic
Mm-hmm.
played in the Champions League final.
A super player.
Super player. What was he like here, on and off the field?
He was very, very quiet.
Mm.
Very, very quiet, but he was scared because Shecky felt like we almost thought it was his son, because
Okay. He was a young guy.
He was a young guy, and he said, "I'll bring you here. You make sure you perform." So he never said much off the field, and he never went out with the players or did any of that. But geez, he was a super player, and he was so nimble, and he could beat players at will. And but he committed himself hardly, which I liked, and not just him, but all 3 of the imports. Often you'd get imports who don't quite
Pull their weight.
No, exactly. But they did, and they made a huge difference.
You would have learned a lot from that, just that experience.
Absolutely. And you know what? The difference in those days between winning and losing was those pressure games. Those guys held us in good stead. All right. I remember the previous year. There were so many close games. It was 0-0 or 1-1, and then we'd lose the last minute. In the next season, with the experience that we had, they're the games we won instead of lost. So
We're listening to Ernie Tapai on the Pioneers with George Danikian and George Katsanis. We're going to take a break. When we come back, some of Ernie's best memories of his days playing in Oz.
Welcome back to the Pioneers Thursday night G1 and G2 with our special guest Ernie Tapai. We've been speaking to you about your Footscray JUST and your Adelaide days. I want to just touch on your move to the UK, how that came about, your time at Stoke City obviously, and your thoughts about why it didn't work. This is your chance to spill the guts on the dirty coach who did play there.
No, well, I had Lou McCurry as a manager.
Legend.
My problem was that by the time I went on trials before the season, and then by the time all was sorted out, the season started. So I hadn't done pre-season with them. And then when I got there, they wouldn't give me a work permit because at that time I'd only played 10 or 12 games for Australia, and they said, well, that's not equivalent of a Frenchman playing to it. So they stopped me for 5-6 months. I could play reserve grade, but I wasn't even eligible to play.
So were you playing constantly in the reserves?
Yeah.
Okay.
So I got to play at Old Trafford and Anfield and midweek. There was nobody there, but it was good fun.
So you're living the life of a professional. We just weren't allowed to aspire to that first team.
Correct.
How does that feel?
Yeah, no, it was difficult. But it was a good learning curve for me because it was, in amongst that, there was one thing that I could never ever do in my life, and that's head of the ball. And when I went to England, I learned to head of the ball because my timing got better, and they do a lot of that, especially in the lower leagues. The ball bounces around a lot, and they're tough. So it toughened me up, and whilst it was disappointing that I didn't get the game time that I would have wished for, it was a real learning experience for me, and to be in negative 2-3 temperatures and the reality of European football at home.
Did you enjoy that part of?
Yeah, I did. But I had aspirations I wanted to play, like everywhere.
You had a deep love for the game.
Yeah, and even in Australia, I chose my clubs carefully because I wanted to always play, because I felt like I was years behind people my peers or my age, so I had to play to learn. And if I was sitting around, then I wasn't going to get better. So.
There were some things that you weren't that brave about. One of them was an episode that surprised the hell out of you and shocked some other people. What are we talking about? You had a bit of a health scare.
Yeah, at the age of 24, nobody in soccer world ever knew this because I never told anybody. But against Sweden in 1992, I blacked out in the middle of the game. Eddie Thompson took me off at half time. The medical staff thought I had an asthma attack. Consequently, a week later,
You let them believe that?
No,
Okay.
I didn't know what the problem was,
Okay,
but my heart
yeah.
was beating fast.
Yeah.
A week later, I was sitting watching telly at home, and my heart was racing at about 180 beats a minute for 6 hours. Called the doctor, they called the ambulance. I went and had all these tests done, and club not knowing, and they eventually found out that I had a heart problem.
Who was your club at that time?
Adelaide City.
Yeah, cool.
A heart defect, and I had an atrial flutter, which your heart races at times, and then it was also irregular. And I
A bit like Tony Vidmar's problem.
Tony Vidmar was ruled out of the World Cup because of it, and one of the AFL players last year passed out in the North game. I can't remember if it was a Melbourne player. So it's quite dangerous, but yeah. And I was offered open heart surgery, which of course I never told anybody because I thought as soon as I tell anybody, then that's the end of my career. And when the surgeon said that, don't worry about soccer, you've got to make sure you get through open heart surgery, my response was, well, if I'm going to die, I'll die on my terms, not yours. So I took tablets for a couple of years with beta blockers, which is supposed to slow your heart rate down, and that coincided with my move to England and Portugal, which is probably not great because what the medication was doing was actually killing my adrenaline as well. So
Which is one of your drivers.
Well, that's
Makes
what I
a
needed.
difference
Yeah,
for you.
and I did. Yeah, my heart wasn't racing as much, but it wasn't. I didn't have to get up and go that I needed, and yeah. So I sort of managed it over the years, and I had some episodes. And when it did happen, it didn't happen too frequently during games. It happened many times during training sessions and at home.
So
I
you
just,
could master
So how would you explain it to the teams that you were playing at the time when you had
just
a
said I
training?
just worked too hard and I'm out of breath.
fatigue.
Yeah. So, and usually those episodes will only last probably a minute or two, three at the worst, but that can be dangerous. Yeah.
of course. But you were so focused on trying to
Well, I didn't see an out.
your way through the game.
I didn't see an out. I thought, if I tell people, then I'll never get another contract. I'll never play soccer. So what am I going to do?
It was all about the soccer.
Well, take us to the soccer. The great memories. What are the ones that you sit, you revere, you laud, and you sit back and you go, I love doing that. What were those moments?
You know what? The one thing out of everything, obviously the camaraderie amongst the players is fantastic, but there is absolutely nothing like being before the game and listening to the national anthem. I mean, I get goosebumps every time I listen to the national anthem, and the times that I was so proud to be an Aussie, and that they're the moments that I remember the most. But certainly, I got to play against the likes of Brazil, the team that went to the '98 World Cup, and Gary Lineker's last game in England, and of course the MCG in Iran, Argentina over there. So I got to play against some fantastic
Talk about the game at the MCG against Iran. What was the national anthem like that night?
Oh, that was amazing. Just to see. That was the first time I think that the Australian public as a whole got behind the national team. Often in the past we'd play the Greek national team or the Croatian or whatever, and then
it was 50-50.
Yeah, if that at best, and to see so many people, and which in our eyes at the time, Iran wasn't a big draw card, not like 4 years previous to that, where Maradona was coming out with Argentina. But to see that many people, 80,000, 90,000 people at the MCG was amazing.
G2 was there with Coops, and they looked at one another and went, how good is this?
Yeah.
It's just fantastic.
It was amazing, wasn't it?
Yeah.
It was an amazing
Two
night.
videos.
It didn't finish an amazing night, and we're all still going to the psychologists and psychotherapists, and none of us will ever get
And
over
we've had a
it.
barrage of people wanting to know.
Everyone wants to know.
Ask Ernie.
Yeah, ask Ernie. Well, my first question was, were you disappointed not to be in the starting 11? Because you come in as a sub.
I come home as a sub in Iran.
Well, tell us, you thought you were going to be playing, didn't you,
Yeah,
in the second leg?
because
Tell us about
in the
that.
first leg I came on a sub in Iran,
Yeah.
and then when we got to Melbourne, Terry Venables did warn me, because I'd been a sub quite regularly. He said, be prepared to play from the start. So he said, I haven't made my decision yet, but be prepared. So I was very excited because I was...
And he'd never done that before?
Never
you?
done that before.
Okay.
No,
All right.
no. So, but as it stood, he went with the same lineup as Iran, and look, and for all those that watched it on the telly and that were there, you could see that there was the game never looked in doubt until the last 15 minutes, and you know what? The soccer followers will talk about a game for a week. This one's gone on for 22 years. It's been a long
This
time.
one will never not be talked about, but it will never go away. It will never go away.
No.
And there's those two arguments, and we discussed it off here, and you gave the counter argument to everyone says, why didn't Venables and the team shut up the game or close the game as such and go defensive and lock it up?
Yep.
Your counter argument was?
Yeah. Well, my counter argument is we've been in enough games to see coaches that do that,
Yeah.
and more often than not, it doesn't work, because all it does invites the opposition into your half, and the pressure builds and the pressure builds. Now, had he done that, we may have conceded 2 goals, and we'd be talking about why he shut up shop when we were, we never looked like conceding a goal. So after the events, it's always easy.
Of course.
To-
Of course.
to-
Speaking about the great man, you worked closely with him, and then you went to the Confederations Cup as well.
Correct.
All right,
Silver medals.
we'll touch on the Confederation Cup. But just Terry, as a word association, Mr. Venables, give us something.
The best man manager I've had.
Yeah.
And not for the things he said, but often for the things he didn't say.
Yeah, like, give us an example, or give us some sort of idea what he would do to play with players' minds to get the positive reaction out of it.
There was a little. We were in the Confederations Cup, and really, Vidmar and I were not playing in that game. We were injured or whatnot, and we actually quizzed him in the other room while the players were getting ready, because his speeches prior to the game were so short. And I said to him, boss, can I ask you? I mean,
You referred to him as boss?
Yeah. Or gaffer.
Yeah.
I said, why do you don't say much? And he said, you know what? He said, I make sure that everything I've got to say has got to be within 3 minutes, all right? Because after that, you guys are not listening. So he compacts everything into 3 minutes, and he's right, because when you think about it, teachers, a classroom, it's probably the same thing.
So he's working on that method that he's got 3 minutes, and the attention after that wanes.
And he was not overwhelmed by the media or anything like that. I went to a media conference with him after the last series against Japan and Korea and whatnot, and full media packed house, and people asking him, which they used to ask a lot of the coaches, they used to say, well, who do you think performed well? And I was sitting next to him and I won player of the tournament, or they gave me a mobile phone or something, right? And he said, you guys are all at the same game, so you don't need to ask me that. And that's how he answered the question. And I know coaches in the past would actually name names. And I thought, well, that's classy, because you know what? You don't need to point me out, or anyone else for that matter, out. You know,
Throw it back at them.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
And you've enjoyed, obviously, that time under him. Forget the result, not qualifying for the World Cup.
But I'll tell you what was amazing.
Yeah.
This was amazing. When originally he put a squad of 22 players together in Europe and then in Australia, all right? He wouldn't have known not one player in Australia, all right? So when he was coming into the hotel, we were in St Kilda Road there, and he was walking in, like everyone was nervous. This is Terry Venables coming in. He walked in, shook everybody's hand, and called them by their first name.
Yeah, class.
So he absolutely class. I mean, he would have
So
studied that.
his man management was perfect from the start.
He probably had the photos and
Oh,
got
no
those
doubt.
names sorted.
No doubt. Well, I heard that when he went to Barcelona, he did his first press conference in
Spanish.
Spanish,
Fantastic.
Yeah.
and nobody ever knew.
Attention to detail.
Absolutely, and that's I think that's where you've nailed it. That's where that he impressed me.
Mm.
And the Confederations Cup after the World Cup qualifier was a very good tournament, except for maybe the final. That was
You had to bring that up, didn't you?
well, just
Oh,
I'm going to skip over.
It's hard to
it.
play against the Brazilians with 11 players
with-
down to 10. It's hard.
And if there was anyone you're going to pick not to get sent off, V-Bomber would probably be the last one, right?
Oh, absolutely,
Okay,
absolutely.
we'll mention him if we get around to it. But there was a little bit of toing and froing with strike action or threatening strike action going into that Confederations Cup. Do you want to elaborate a little bit and what was behind that?
Yeah, well, there was Socceroos prior to that were paid very, very little compensation for playing your country, and we don't play it for the money, obviously, and nobody ever does. But
The crowds were coming, the
But-
marketing was there.
absolutely, and we had just finished at the MCG with 90,000 people. We got a paltry amount that people would earn more in a day's work. All right, and then we went to the Confederations Cup and we found out that they actually, for appearing, they got multi-millions.
Yes, correct.
So all we asked for was that, you know what, let's be fair and let's divide up, because what you got to remember is that players, particularly players who are playing in Australia, we would often lose our jobs when we travel, and then we'd have to come back, find another job, and lose it again, and it was
The
the sacrifices were huge. So
Yeah.
and we didn't do it for the money, and in the end they did agree to give us 50% of everything that was earned in the tournament. We came runners up, and we got a little bit of a result this time.
You don't have to give us an exact figure, but compared to what you may have got if you didn't have that action, what were you looking at getting before the tournament? Just say for the tournament, just a rough figure. Well,
You want exact?
yes, I'll take exact if you're offering it.
He's subtle, isn't he?
If you're going to be like that, give me exact.
We got paid $1,000 to play at the MCG each.
Yeah.
Right?
And what were they giving you for the Confederations?
And the
What-
Confederations Cup was like prior to the MCG, we used to be on $300 a win in an international.
Right.
All right, and 200 a draw, 100 a loss. All right,
Right.
which is okay. And and then the Confederations Cup, we just said, you know what, whatever you get, we'll split it evenly. And we end up getting $50,000.
I know players in the NPL that are earning more money than that.
Yeah, admittedly it was a long time ago, but it was we just felt like we were taking it for a ride. And you know what, it was difficult for me personally to see, because I by that time I'd been an older player and I'd been around a lot of finals games, and when I saw a whole hotel booked out with commissioners for NSL finals games, and they had the money for that, but nothing to compensate something for the players, that was difficult to take. And look, by that time the PFA was set up, and people like Brendan Schwab, Alex Tobin was leading the charge, and Frank Farina, Craig Foster, and we had the overseas-based players, and we had to group together, and it was for the benefit of the game. It wasn't just for the players.
Just for the record, did all the players support it?
All but two.
Names or no names?
Ah.
Stays in house. Is
Yeah,
it public?
sorry.
Is it public? No, it's not
No,
public.
it's not
No,
public.
don't. Leave it alone.
No, that's cool. I just wanted to
I
check.
like the sanctuary and the
Of the pioneers.
Not only the pioneers, but the dressing room.
Of course,
Yeah, that's
I
important.
respect that. I just wasn't sure.
Let's
if it was
talk
public.
about some of the fabulous players that you played for them. You know, many fantastic players. Viduka for a start. Some of the others.
Oh, for me, Viduka was the best player I ever played with. Full stop. He
The
was
V-ball.
look, you know, to be top goal scorer at 19 and 20 in the league here, and then go
And
overseas.
player of the year.
And he was so strong. He was so hard to get the ball away. And you know what? You don't say that in Socceroo camps, because in Socceroo camps the level is up there with everybody. But for me, he was so strong on the ball. And even though he didn't score as many goals as he would have liked for the Socceroos, but he's often a lone ranger.
Mm.
And but for me, I mean, they were super players. All of them were. You know, Kill and Foster and Tobin and Ivanovic. The list goes on and on.
A young Harry Kuehl was in that.
Very
team.
special.
He was 17, I think. He's just turned 17, maybe 18 at that time, and he'd scored in the away leg, scored in the home leg, so his star was on the rise. You were a little bit older. Did you sense at that point that this boy was going to
Oh, there's no doubt. And everybody knew. And I know I was there for his first game when he was capped. We played against Chile, and Eddie Thompson made a point of capping him. I don't know if he just turned 17.
before England did?
Yeah, before England did. And you could see he was a special player. By the time he was doing well at Leeds, he was doing everything.
Ivanovic.
Oh, look, incredible. And he was he read the game better than I've seen anybody ever read the game. You know, and to play in, it's common ground nowadays, and I have my own views on that. Why? But in those days, to play at 37 and 38 and be so dominant was unheard of. You know, players were pushed out the door by younger guys coming through at the age of 30, 31. You know, but he was so smart. He was so clever. You know.
What was he like as a communicator as well? Was he the silent type, or was he the vocal?
No, he wasn't. No, he wasn't vocal at all. And it's funny because the two of them who I played spent a lot of time with Alex Tobin and Milan Ivanovic, and they used to share a room together. I don't even know if they
known as
spoke.
the Whisperers.
Yeah, they
Known as the Whisperers.
They didn't speak.
Tell me about Bosnich. What did you make of Mark Bosnich?
Well, I had the opportunity to room with Mark during that.
That would have
World
been
Cup
interesting.
Yeah. Mark's he very loud, you know, and a lot of people love him. I hate him. I loved him
He's
because
a goalkeeper.
Yeah, but he his values, you could see his family values were great, because he would josh around with the younger guys, but he always had respect for the older guys, you know. And but he was a superstar. I mean, he was at Man United. He was wearing his Versace suits and ordering limos and doing all the things that.
Was he a sharer?
Yeah, no, he was a yes.
Okay.
No, a lovely guy and a super player, and he's unfortunately his career came to an end far too early.
Very sad for all of us.
Paul Trimboli.
Oh, an absolute legend. A legend of a guy, a legend of a player.
What made him special to you?
You know what? He was a little bit like Viduka. You couldn't get the ball off him. All right. And I roomed a lot with Paul, and he's just such a super bloke, and everyone loved him, and he's a treasure of the game.
And tell us about Frank Farina.
Frankie taught me a few lessons early, because I
Good
made
lessons?
Yeah,
You weren't driving lessons.
No. Because I made the national team as I was 19, and he was already get up and go at that point in time. But Frankie came from the Sydney City background,
School of Hard Knocks.
School of Hard Knocks.
Ooh.
And one of my first training sessions at we were taking corners in New Zealand under Frank Arrock, and I was marking him, and him in the mouth in the corner at a training session. And I thought, okay, all right, this is how it is. And well, obviously became teammates, and I had a lot to do with him in later years. And well, actually, when he was in Belgium, I was trialling with Bruges at the same time. So
Elbows?
Yeah, and he wasn't afraid of that. And but he did really well for himself. People forget that, you know, he was the first Aussie that went to Italy, and he was top goal scorer in Belgium for many years at a time where Aussies weren't given a go.
Few far between.
Him and Vlado Bosnowski were the first to sort of go.
Tell us about your time in Portugal.
Yeah, Portugal was difficult, but again, it was another learning curve, because I went to a country that was non-English speaking. So I had to learn very, very quickly to adapt. It was a different style of football. I was playing in in a club where the conditions were probably a lot worse than what I was used to in the NSL. You know, the ground, and it was a really small club. But yeah,
passionate, but super passionate.
but super passionate, and yeah, it was a life lesson for me.
Yeah.
And a good life lesson. And then people say, I mean, Zoran Matic, when I came back, he said, you should never have gone overseas. I said, no, absolutely, because you know what, I think your failures make you as a person as much as your achievements.
That's a very good point.
Yeah.
It's also how you climb back up.
Absolutely.
From the setbacks and everything like that. Speaking of setbacks, take us to one of those magical moments when you won the league and the cup double with Adelaide City, and then of course when you won the league in Singapore, when you played the season unbeaten.
Oh.
You did an Arsenal.
Oh, that was fantastic. Yeah, I mean, Adelaide City, we had a fantastic crop of players there, you know, and it was really enjoyable. And we were close knit, got a small town, and we really enjoyed the success there, and we deserved it, and we had a great bunch of boys. Singapore was, well, you know what, I actually felt guilty getting paid there because it was a working holiday. I went there with my mate Vlado Bosanoski, where I thought it was the end of my career, and I'd finished up at Perth Glory, and I went there, and we went 21 games unbeaten. We lived in a condo, played tennis all day, played squash, had an hour and a half for training, went shopping during the day. And you know this, the weather in Singapore is 32, so everything. You know.
Favourite dish in Singapore?
Oh, we used to have the chicken rice for lunch always.
Chicken
rice. Yeah. So it was.
What was the standard of football like?
Look, like all the Asian countries, they're quick, and obviously technical.
Yeah.
But Singaporeans they were physically undermanned. You know, so so Aussies that went there or anyone from anywhere else did all right. So the standard wasn't great. But we played at night in good stadiums, and they just introduced the betting into Singapore in the football game, so all the stadiums were full. Admittedly, they weren't big stadiums, but they were all full. But to have a bunch of guys that we used to stick together and to go 21 games unbeaten, it was
special.
magical.
Was it, as a professional, were you earning better money over there than you would have been, say, in the NSL at the time? Or was it just a lifestyle choice?
Yes.
That was money as well?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, but I didn't go there for lifestyle. I think everyone in the NSL had enough of me. I was too old, I was not washed up and gone. And and then we had a Dutch coach, you need another foreigner, and he said, you want to come over? So I said, yeah.
Fantastic. You did coach, and I understand that your most memorable moment as a coach was coaching.
Well, I had a stint at Thomastown and then Westgate, and then I did Corio, and I was running the Geelong Grammar soccer program there. So look, working with young guys is always a pleasure.
And girls.
And oh yes, and that as well. And and my daughter's team at Brighton conned me into.
Conned you?
Yeah.
We need a dad to know something about soccer. Does anyone know anything about soccer?
Well, she went to the club and they already had a coach in the following year. She said, "Can you?" But I was already committed to 2 other clubs. I was Corio, and I was doing Geelong Grammar. And she said, "Well, can you coach?" I said, "When do you think I'm going to get the time to do this?" You know, I was going up to Geelong at the time. You know, and
so what happened?
Yeah, no, I did. I went to Geelong Grammar at 4:00, from Geelong Grammar to Corio at 6:00 or 5:30, 5:45, finished at 8 and went to Brighton, and then coached from 8 till 9:00 till 10:30, and they had a great season. They went unbeaten for the year, and she loved it. So it was really, really enjoyable, and it was an unpaid job, and it was probably my most memorable.
Some of the unpaid ones are always.
Yes.
That's the special ones.
We're going to do a little bit of word association. I did warn you. All right, so I'm going to throw up some. So I don't get nailed to a cross by the travelling Maltese. Sunshine George Cross. We'll pretend that's one word, even though it's now Caroline Springs George Cross. What's your memories of your time at George Cross? Because I'll get stabbed for sure if I don't mention it.
Oh no! Look, you know what? We had a good year there. I won.
Who was the coach at the time?
Ernie Merrick was
Okay,
coach.
all right.
Yeah. It was unfortunate, but they were in George Cross at the time were in a phase where they were trying to redevelop players. So we had a lot of young guys.
Were you playing at Skinner at the time? At Skinner
Correct.
Reserve? Yeah, on the Sunday nights.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, cool.
So it was we had a lot of young guys in the team. So and at that time I had just been dropped from the Socceroos, and I did have a good season with George Cross, and it was very enjoyable with the likes of Craig and Paul Foster and.
Yep. Was that when Lawrence Kidner started to break through?
Lawrence Kidner, Clarkson, Dan Clarkson, there was quite a few guys. So and they all went on and did well. So you know, it was nice. It was just difficult for me because it was such a long way to travel, and there was really no ambition there. And I needed, at that point in time, I was 23, 24, I needed to start stepping up where I needed to be a bit more ambitious and win things.
All right, try a couple of Latif, as in Aussie.
Aussie Latif. Aussie he was scary too. He was a gentle, he wasn't even giant because he wasn't a big guy. But big heart, big heart, and he worked so hard. But you just knew that Aussie was not just the type of bloke you want to say the wrong thing in the street.
Don't cross him.
Don't cross him. The old bouncer from the Italian social club.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. But he was a decent striker.
Oh, he was a very good striker.
And he was very good for you. And in that period at George Cross and Sunshine, he was prolific.
Well, I played with him at Footscray.
Yeah.
So I didn't think.
No, that's right. But I'm saying when he was at George Cross as well, he was prolific.
He was amazing.
So even I think at Croatia he scored a lot of goals. So, and he was fit and a strong boy.
Oh yes.
Another one I'm going to throw at you, an old mate of yours, Lazopoulos, Billy Lazop.
Usain Bolt. That's my favourite. He was quick.
He was super quick.
Flash. And you know what? I see him quite regularly, and I reckon he's still as fit as he was then. And he looks great. And he always looked after himself. Always watched what he ate. And he was tall. He could get on the end of things. And you know, I would have liked to see him stay in the NSL for longer.
He was unfortunate with injuries, wasn't he?
Yeah.
Injuries crueled him.
Yeah, and he had a bad head clash at one stage as well. And but super quick. Super quick.
You came to Footscray as a striker from Western Suburbs and converted into a full-back, tough nut centre half. And he did that job pretty well too, considering you wouldn't have picked that, would you?
He's got great mentality. So he's the type of guy that you can get him to do anything, and you'll ask him to do anything, he'll do anything. So and he's got those work ethics have carried him over into working life as well.
Very good. Glad to hear it.
Tomorrow is International Women's Day. Any chance your daughter might end up a future Matilda?
No chance.
Oh.
No chance. No,
Okay.
she was.
You cut that quick.
No. Yeah, the problem with I could say my kids, middle class Australians, is that they have too many choices.
They're too comfortable.
Oh, this particular daughter I'm talking about, and I won't even mention. I won't mention.
Just because you don't remember it.
No. But yeah, she was an athlete. She won every race and decided she wanted to do athletics. Then I put her into tennis, and she smashed everyone tennis. So I buy a house with a tennis court. I'm thinking I'll get her a thing. Yep.
No interest.
And then she said, I want to play soccer.
Well, you can convert the tennis court into a five-side
field.
field.
Futsal.
I thought, you know what, that's a problem. They have too many choices, and I think that's where we're
The lucky country.
Yeah, that's where we're probably our development with the game.
Well, we've been
struggling.
extraordinarily lucky, pioneers, to grab Ernie Tapai. It's been a joy, mate, and to get the scoop about what happened to you and your health scare. We thank you very much for giving us so much honesty, and I think we loved the way you played. We loved, deep down, we all knew how much you loved playing, whether it was for Australia or your clubs around the world. It's been some journey. There's a little bit of wine there, just to settle you down after that heart of yours has been pumping at 1,000,000 miles an hour. G2, who do we have tomorrow? Next week, rather?
Next week, I've got a surprise for you, Georgie. I've got a special guest, especially for you. Peter Catholis will be on the phone live with us next Thursday night.
Oh, my God. I've just discovered I've got a red card. Ernie Tapai, thank you for joining us.
Thank you, George, and a great job you guys are doing in the studio and bringing back all these things. I see it every week, and it's very nostalgic. Thank you.
Lovely.
Sensational.
Great work. Great show.
FNR, Football Nation Radio.
No call! Score!
Salamidi for Cole. Cole on the run. Shoots. 2-0.
Lazanovsky with the free kick. Launches a rocket! Trimboli, what vision! Blasts. Yes! That's it!
Miljevic.
Here's Matic. They haven't! They might have won it!
The Pioneers with George Danikian and George Kotzanis on FNR, Football Nation Radio.